Hi everyone. We would like to talk about the sustainability design in Portland in 2050. So as a brief agenda, we will introduce the city and our 2050 vision, as well as development strategies broken down in 7 parts. And then with those strategies, we would like to talk about the impacts of those strategies, and then the closing remarks. So Portland is the capital of Oregon. It's a fairly small city with 643,000 residents within an area of 376 kilometers square, and it is already considered to be one of the America's most sustainable cities. So looking at the existing plans, they already have a fairly comprehensive plan, and also the transfer plan, climate action plan, as well as the city's mayor's announcement to transition to 100% of renewable energy in 2050. But those plans are great, but not very specific. So we would like to have some specific designs to improve those plans.
Just to briefly go over our vision for Portland in 2050, we like to summarize it with the statement that Portland in 2050 should be among the world's sustainability veterans, but should remain one of its pioneers. So the city already has a very intrinsic, very easy to observe sustainability culture, even at the community level. And so we want to carry that momentum forward so that in 2050 they are still kind of leading the charge on sustainability globally, but are also, one of these cities that's considered to have been sustainable for a while. Key objectives that we want to focus on in this design are the decarbonization of Portland's energy supply. Currently they rely on coal a lot for their electricity. We want to reduce the auto-centric nature of their transportation. A lot of people still rely on private automobiles, and so we need to increase use of transit and active transportation. Community level sustainability culture, which I've already mentioned, very important in the city, and what that goes along with is sort of social equity and kind of elevating the struggling neighborhoods in the city so that overall there's an economic improvement. We also want to promote the consumption of local foods and materials. Just to briefly touch on our philosophy and influences, we had a bit of influence from ideas of new urbanism and also everyday urbanism from Crawford, Chase, and Kaliski. And then we had a couple of different cities which we sort of taken as inspiration in some of their energy and land use practices, Chicago, Las Vegas, and Gothenburg. Gothenburg in Sweden is actually particularly noteworthy because they've done a very successful repurposing of brownfield areas for new community development.
So in terms of the building in 2050, we look at 4 criteria to make a selection of our design. So for the suitability part, since Portland is a city that has a lot of precipitation during the winter, but not so much in the summer, so that has to take account when we choose designs such as the solar buildings. And the resistance is because Portland is located in an area where earthquake is fairly active. So based on these selections, we choose the nested thermal envelope and super insulation, as well as the district energy, where several buildings in the district are heated by one single energy plant. So to make those happen, we have to make some modifications in the existing building codes, such as raising the standard for ceiling insulation. And also, we need to add a section for the residential and commercial buildings energy efficiency, which is currently lacking. And also, in terms of rating system, they use a LED system, but it's not very detailed. So we need a dedicated rating system that encourages sustainability practices such as insulation and district energy. Transportation in 2050, we really want to be focused, as we said, on promoting public transit and active transit, or active transportation. So here we took a look at the city, looked at the high density areas and identified spaces which either are already high density and need better access to transit, or areas where we would expect significant growth by 2050. So by identifying household and job growth hotspots, we came up with this transit plan. So the big component of the transit plan is the addition of 57 kilometers of new LRT lines, 6 different lines spread mostly on the eastern side of the city. So this provides a much better transit access to economically struggling areas. We want to reduce the auto mode share from currently 78% down to 55%. We believe that this can
create an overall vehicle kilometers traveled per capita reduction of 27%. Heavy electrification of the auto transportation sector is also a key component of this. So we're expecting a lot more electric vehicles, both in freight and private transportation by 2050. And this will be a major contributor to GHG reductions. This is a street layout for a major arterial road. You see we've got segmented rights of way for both transit and for bicycles. We're also widening sidewalks, and again, this all goes along with our active transportation and public transit priorities. And through these street adjustments, we're hoping to get, well, and other policies as well, we're hoping to increase active transportation in terms of mode share by up to 25%. So yeah.
So in terms of the land use, we want to prevent urban sprawl by encouraging mixed land use, combining office spaces with residential on different floors. And also we want to repurpose the industrial brownfields in the northwestern Portland by office buildings and green spaces. So those will come into effect that the high density residential is expected to increase from the total area of 17% to 27%, and there is a slight increase of green space coverage as well. As you can see from those GIS maps, the first one is 2017, and the blue areas highlighted is the low density housing, but they have a high population growth. We refer back to the population heat map a few slides ago. So in 2050, we will focus on these areas and to make a high density.
So one area where our social equity priorities really come into play is the neighborhood design. So this is a sample neighborhood design for the neighborhood in Portland, where we maintain the existing street grid, but have a very comprehensive redevelopment so that the neighborhood is really made up of mixed dwelling types. And what this does is breaks down economic barriers in the city so that you can have people at multiple income levels all sharing the same community space in the same neighborhood. We want to maintain green space so that it's accessible for all residents, with things like mid-block parks and parks next to high-rise buildings. So this would be a large high-rise residential development, sort of mid-rise, single-family housing, and also townhouses all mixed together on the same set of blocks. We want to ensure proximity to transit, making sure that there's no more than 400 meters between any part of the neighborhood and some kind of access to either bus or LRT, and also promote the use of mixed-use buildings. All of this is really aimed at making neighborhoods more walkable and at making them more accessible and reducing the need to travel far for errands. Energy considerations, again, our biggest priority is to phase out coal completely and reduce other fossil fuels as much as possible. The electrification of the transportation network is going to mean that we have much higher electricity demand. So electricity in infrastructure, particularly from renewable sources, needs to be dramatically increased. We're looking to increase the use of hydropower from 23% to 35% of the energy mix. Huge development in wind and solar, both on buildings within the city and on farms outside of the city. Increase that percentage of the energy mix all the way up to 50%. And the use of district energy and cogeneration has been shown to, or it's been shown that that can actually help us reduce the needs of buildings in residential areas by 40% or more. Overall, we want to reduce the energy requirements of Portland by 21%. Here we have the energy use by sector and the 2050 energy mix. These parts of the pie over here, natural gas and fossil fuels used for transportation, dramatically reduced, but there's still some use just for either legacy vehicles or some parts of the system that haven't fully converted yet. But overall, we're looking at an 85% renewable energy sources.
So for the water design, we would like to reduce the daily water consumption from 346 liters to 245. And this is justifiable because based on the data in 2012 to 2017, the population increase is noticeable. However, the total amount of water consumption stays roughly the same. So we can safely project that in 2050, with a more increasing population from 640K to 800K, we are able to reduce the per capita consumption with a few stricter, more stringent measures as outlined below. So the first one is the rainwater harvesting system. So that can be done with permeable pavement in, for example, the parking lot in the city, and also the green roofs on the residential and commercial buildings. For the gray water system, we expect to have a recycling system in a building level so that some of the water can be used for irrigation. Also for the water treatment plan, we expect an upgrade such as expansion using the extra land, as you can see there, and also to improve the filtration process that allows to convert some of the water potable. One innovation for the water conservation is that we want to implement a digital metering system. Currently, most of the metering systems, you need someone to come to your home and check the numbers. So we want to digitize this process and connect this with the smartphone app to track the real-time usage. So in this way, the user will know which day they consume the water the most, and also where to conserve the water. So in terms of waste in 2050, we would like to reduce the solid waste by a large margin. And this can be done by banning the plastic bags and containers. And also in terms of waste transport, we really want to minimize the GHG emissions. So we can use the zero-emission vehicles to transport the waste, or the underground vacuum pipes as shown below. That's a new design by a Swedish company is currently in experimentation, and that effectively eliminates GHG emissions during the waste transport. And also another way is to expand the thrift and reuse shops to raise awareness of recycling. So overall, with our plans, we can reduce the GHG emission by 80.4% overall, and that aligns with the goal set up by the United States in general, so 80% of reduction. So those can be contributed by three key areas. The first one is the electrification of the public transport system, as well as less SOV vehicles. And also, second one is the implementation of energy-saving practices for buildings, and those practices can effectively reduce the GHG emission by 75%. And also, we want to decarbonize the electricity supply and use alternative energy system rather than coal, which composes of 43% of the energy mix. So,
yeah, just to briefly touch on the urban metabolism of the city, 2017 as compared with 2050. The key impacts of our plan are, first of all, the reduction in GHG emissions, which Dominic just discussed. And then in addition to that, the water policies actually had a very significant impact on water consumption in the city. So in spite of that population increase to about 800,000 people from 643,000 in 2017, we're looking at very similar overall water consumption, but the provision of municipal water and water that actually needs to be treated goes down because we're looking at ways of collecting rainwater either through permeable pavements, green roofs, or other methods. Which really helps to reduce the amount of municipal water required. So those are our sort of key reductions. Solid waste is also reduced pretty significantly, but the really big contributors to the sustainability improvements really are GHGs and water. That gives you a little bit of a closer look at the 2050 urban metabolism. And just to touch briefly on Sustainable Development Goal number 11. So it sets a number of fairly general targets, several of which don't really apply directly to our sustainability design for Portland. But there are also several of those targets which we really which we think our plan actually hits very well. And that comes down to a couple of the elements of our design. First of all, so our equity priorities and community level sustainability really does have a significant impact on some of those targets. Energy decarbonization, tremendous environmental impact. I mean, we're looking at actually achieving that 80% reduction. And public transit improvements, the goal does set specific targets for inclusive and accessible public transit. And also environmental building practices really do have an effect here. So we're quite happy with how we were able to meet that goal through these plans.
So as a closing remark, current plans in Portland are very good, but not very detailed. So we propose some of the areas that need to improve upon. And we think our design presents a realistic plan for significant improvement over the long run. Although Portland has some challenges that need to balance with those in the United States and national, global, sustainable context, I think many of these transitions will be challenging, but the final result is highly desirable, and we think our plan meets the goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.